Hey there, Daniel. I just wanted to do one final response to um, the conversation we've been having about the problem of suffering, or ta, as I've been calling it. And there are several points you made in your last video that I wanted to address. The first one is not really about the argument itself, but about the burden of proof. A burden of proof is normally said to apply to anyone making a claim, and these videos, you will recall, are why positive atheists are justified in their claim that God cannot, or at least almost certainly does not, exist. This is a claim, and thus there is a burden of proof on the claimant, in this case, you. If I said theism is just a lack of belief in atheistic claims, you wouldn't let me get away with that. What's good for the goose is good for the gander. And then the second point that you made that I wanted to address was that it seems you've changed premise 2 from the private message to the video rebuttal. At least in the most recent video, you've given a more explicit and more nuanced view of it, of premise 2. And I'm just pointing that out here for the sake of clarity. Straw man. You claim I committed the straw man fallacy. Well, I don't think I did. You presented an argument from suffering against the existence of God, and I addressed in my rebuttal video that argument from suffering. It is quite true I talked about the problem of evil, but that was only within the context of addressing the argument from suffering proper, and I'll say some more about this point in a moment. And next you talked about natural evil not being the result of free will in human beings. Natural evil is not the result of human evil, you say? Well, that begs the question. The Christian view is that natural evil, no less than moral evil, is a result of the fall or of human sinfulness. We suffer from earthquakes and tsunamis because of human sin. That is part of the total package of Christian theism, and it is the consistency of the total package of theism that is in question here. So it's simply false that natural evil is not the result of human sin and free will. And then you say that I equate death and suffering and evil. I did not say that death is synonymous with evil and suffering. What I said was that physical suffering is a warning signal of potential death if immediate action isn't taken. If your hand is on a hot stove burner, it hurts, of course. And since it hurts, you want to remove it immediately, and that's what you do. You will then run it under cold water to soothe the pain, and you'll treat the wound so it gets better. If you just leave it on the burner, it will get worse and worse. If you don't treat it, it shall get infected, and you can eventually die from that infection. The suffering is distinct from the death, but the suffering can lead to death. Pain or suffering helps us to stay alive longer. And what is emotional pain? Primarily, there are 3 sources of emotional pain. And there may be others, but these are the 3 primary ones. We suffer emotional pain, first of all, when a loved one dies. Secondly, if we are wronged by another person. So that would be an example of moral evil, if somebody sins against us. And finally, if a natural evil occurs to us, for example, a hurricane destroys our house, we don't like that, we're suffering because of that. It's a non-physical kind of suffering, but it's still suffering. And natural evil, as I said before, is a result of human sin on the Christian view. And death certainly is a result of human sin as well. So the 3 main examples or kinds of non-physical suffering are all traceable back to free will in humans. Okay, so death, suffering, and evil are all different, but they are interrelated. They are related so closely that a free will defense is appropriate here, even though the problem of evil per se is not in view. After all, if there were no evil, there would be no suffering, and this evil is not only logically compatible with the Christian system, it is theologically necessitated by it. And finally, you say that free will doesn't solve the problem of evil. Not the problem of suffering, but the problem of evil. Does the free will defense fail? I don't think so. Christian apologists and atheist philosophers alike usually agree that the free will defense is successful, so the deductive problem of evil is unsound. I have heard atheists admit this publicly in debates with Christian apologists. So if you hold to a different position, you are in the minority. My guess is that your primary reason for rejecting the free will defense is because you think it does not address natural evil. But as I've said before, this is simply false. If you have any other reason for your rejection, I don't know what it is, so I can't comment. However, isn't it obvious that the free will defense works? Does Christianity allow for an omnipotent and omnibenevolent deity? Of course it does. Clearly the answer is yes. Does Christianity allow for free will? The Bible makes it clear that we've rebelled against God. That's free will. If God wants us to be good, but also wants us to be free, then he cannot force us, even with omnipotence, to not choose to do evil. We can't be forced to freely choose something. Now, of course, again, this is for the problem of evil, not the problem of suffering. But as I've said previously, this new problem, the problem of suffering, is similar enough that we can invoke the free will defense here too. You admit yourself that the argument from suffering is similar to the argument from evil. You also admit the premise 2 is controversial. Why is it controversial? It is controversial for the same reason that the corresponding premise in the argument from evil is controversial, because it glosses over free will, hoping nobody will notice. In conclusion, once my original rebuttal is correctly understood, it is successful against your argument, Daniel. And my original claim that Ta is unsound stands firm. The argument from suffering is fallacious because its second premise is false. I hasten to add, though, that I've enjoyed our disagreement thus far, and if you have anything more to say on the matter, and I'm sure you probably do have some more that you'll want to say, I will look forward to hearing that with anticipation. My only complaint is that nobody else has taken me up on the challenge yet, the call to YouTube atheists. Of course, that has nothing to do with you. You've answered the call admirably, and I thank you for it. You are welcome for the subscription, by the way. My main motivation in subscribing to your channel was so I can hear what you have to say in rebuttal to the classic arguments for God. You apparently plan to critique the cosmological, ontological, and teleological arguments for the existence of God. I look forward to viewing those videos once you get a chance to post them. Thank you. Shalom.